I hope everyone's having a good day today. I wanted to just share a little bit. Yesterday, I had a client that happened to also be a caregiver. And one of the things that I think is just important to mention, my name is Deborah Jackson. I'm a board certified chaplain. I am also a minister, and I am a former caregiver who has in the past cared for my mother for 11 years. And so now that my mother has passed away, I'm on the other side of that journey. And so I feel like I'm able to speak to a number of things as well as support people on this journey when it comes to the mental health side of things as well as the spiritual side of things. What I'm going to share is really a combination of both emotional and spiritual. But I had a client yesterday who was sharing a little bit about some really hard decisions that they're facing. They are going through severe caregiver burnout, and they've been giving care for well over a decade. And in many areas of this experience, it is becoming more and more challenging, which it tends to do over time. But one of the things that I thought was really crucial to share about is this idea of control, and how caregivers, family caregivers, especially any caregiver that's been giving care for a while, particularly for, I'm going to say it could vary for each individual, but for decades or 10 years, 5 years, any lengthy period of time, which is this understanding of going through really difficult experiences as, say, your person's health begins to decline, or you're in a season where things are up and down and maybe they're more down. And so as a result, the intensity of hospital visits and decisions and the consequences of your loved one's health is beginning to intensify. Over the time frame of giving care for someone, many caregivers relate and understand the issue that is often faced with fighting and advocating for your loved one, particularly when they are not necessarily able to advocate for themselves any longer, and how much of a struggle and a stress that can be on a caregiver dealing with physicians and hospitals and all kinds of clinicians and administrators, and even just simply making decisions. There are several things that are wrapped into that. One is on the spiritual side. I just want to say how much I see you and I stand with you and I hold space with you, because there's not much that we deal with in any experience, but specifically to this experience, that for many people, no matter what their faith is, they are navigating and coping with it through the lens of their spirituality, their religion, their faith, their relationships, and also the grief and the loss that is happening along the way. And so one of the things that takes place when you are beginning to experience burnout are literally living in burnout, which many caregivers do, which I did, is this understanding that now you're in the middle of making a decision or having to make a decision, and you feel a lack of control, number one, over what the outcomes are going to be. Spiritually, one of the things that I find has been helpful, and certainly shared this yesterday with my client, is this understanding that we can only do so much, which may seem simple, but we can only do one thing at a time. And so oftentimes being able to have someone that is a real support system to you, even if it's a therapist, a leader, a spiritual leader that really gets it, a therapist that really gets it, is being able to frame what is needed in this moment, and also being able to, from a spiritual perspective, navigate that lens with a conscious understanding that in this moment, specifically, that may be distressing you the most, that in this moment, not everything is in my control. And even just an awareness of that reality is helpful in being able to frame what decisions need to be made now and being able to prioritize them. And then even cognitively and emotionally being able to wrap your heart around the fact that not everything is within my control, which means that this intersection that I'm going through may very well be one of those things that I have to loosen my grip and begin to trust, in my case, God. In your case, it could be God. Trust in Christ, that this is one of those moments where I have to loosen the grip and trust that whatever is going to take place in this moment is not on me, but it is under the sovereignty of God. The second thing is, in this experience of burnout, we oftentimes are functioning in burnout for long periods of time without, it's not that we don't necessarily know that we're exhausted or that one may be exhausted, but there's oftentimes not much we can do about it. So when someone says, oh, take space and find time and all of those things, they sound really nice to someone who has not been a family caregiver, but they're not necessarily a straight line or easy to do. And so as a result, one of the things that I often share is being able to frame what decisions are in front of you. And this is what I was touching on earlier. What are the 3 things that are needed in this moment and in a particular sequence? And what it helps is for you to not begin to read the script and anticipate and plan for what hasn't happened yet, but to be able to get your mind to focus on what is right in front of you. Those are 2 tools that helped me on my 14 plus years of oversight and care of my mother. And I find that in integrating mental health theory and practices, as well as spiritual practices and spiritual education, as well as some levels of psychoeducation, it is helpful to be able to bring those 2 things together in order to move from 1 minute into the next minute, into the next minute, as opposed to what is so easy to do as a family caregiver, which is to see all of the crisis as opposed to being able to bring the crisis in much closer to what is in front of you right now, or the top 3 things in front of you right in that moment. I hope this is helpful.